The first time I saw Luca Moretti, there was blood on a white tablecloth and 5 men staring at me like I had already signed my own death certificate. The ballroom at the Grand Crescent Hotel smelled like expensive perfume, champagne, and rain carried in from Park Avenue every time the revolving doors turned. Crystal chandeliers reflected gold light across marble floors so polished I could practically see my panic staring back at me. My black heels were killing my feet after 9 straight hours of serving drinks to Manhattan's richest people, and the tray balanced in my hands suddenly felt heavier than the student loans waiting on my kitchen counter at home. Table 16 needs another bottle. My manager snapped into my earpiece as I pushed through clusters of laughing guests wrapped in diamonds and tailored tuxedos. I muttered a quiet apology after bumping shoulders with some Wall Street guy who smelled like cigars and old money, then hurried toward the private hallway near the East Wing. Employees weren't supposed to use that corridor unless specifically assigned, but the ballroom was chaos. The kitchen was backed up, and honestly, I just wanted 30 seconds without someone yelling at me. The music from the orchestra faded behind me the deeper I walked into the hallway. The carpet softened my footsteps. Rain tapped softly against the towering windows overlooking the city, and for one stupid second, I stopped to admire the skyline glowing silver through the storm. Manhattan looked unreal from 40 stories up, like a movie, like a place someone like me was never supposed to belong in. Then I heard voices. Male, low, sharp, angry in the controlled kind of way that made the back of my neck tighten. I should have turned around immediately. I know that now. But curiosity is dangerous when you grow up invisible. The door beside me sat slightly open, warm light spilling through the crack. I reached for the handle before my brain could stop me. The room inside wasn't another ballroom or VIP lounge. It was smaller, quieter, dead silent the second I stepped in. My breath caught so hard it hurt. 5 men turned toward me at once. Dark suits, cold eyes, one long table covered in stacks of paperwork and black cases that definitely didn't belong at a charity gala. A crystal whiskey glass rested beside someone's hand, untouched. Another man slowly lowered a pen onto the table like I had interrupted something important enough to change lives. Or end them. My tray slipped before I could stop it. Champagne glasses shattered across the marble floor with a sound so loud it echoed through the room like gunfire. Nobody moved. Nobody even blinked. I stared at the broken glass around my feet while my pulse slammed so hard against my ribs I thought I might pass out right there in front of them. I'm sorry, I whispered automatically. I thought this was the service hallway. Silence. Heavy. Suffocating. Then I looked up. He sat at the far end of the table like he owned the oxygen in the room. Early 30s maybe. Dark hair brushed neatly away from a face too calm to belong in a moment like this. His black suit fit perfectly against broad shoulders. No tie, just the top button of his white shirt undone like rules didn't apply to him anymore. But it was his eyes that froze me in place. Gray. Cold. Focused entirely on me. Not the broken glasses. Not the interruption. Me. One of the men beside him finally spoke. She saw too much. My stomach dropped so fast it felt like missing a stair in the dark. Another man reached inside his jacket. I took one terrified step backward. The stranger at the end of the table lifted one hand slightly. Everyone stopped instantly. The room obeyed him without hesitation. He studied me for what felt like forever while rain streaked against the windows behind him. Then his gaze dropped briefly to the name tag pinned crookedly against my uniform. Evelyn Carter. When he said my name, his voice was low and perfectly calm. Close the door, Evelyn. My fingers shook so badly, I nearly dropped the tray completely. Tiny shards of crystal glittered across the marble floor around my shoes, while every man in that room watched me like I was something fragile standing too close to the edge of a cliff. I should have apologized again. I should have run. Instead, for reasons I still do not understand, I obeyed him. I turned slowly and pushed the door shut behind me. The click echoed louder than the shattered glasses had. My throat tightened instantly. It felt final somehow, like I had just locked myself inside a world that did not let people leave. Rain streaked down the windows overlooking Midtown Manhattan, turning the city lights into blurred gold smears against the darkness outside. Nobody spoke for several long seconds. The men around the table looked expensive in the terrifying way only truly powerful people do. Perfect watches, tailored suits, calm faces hiding dangerous thoughts. One man near the window kept staring at me with obvious irritation, like my existence alone had ruined something carefully planned. Another leaned back in his chair, studying me with detached curiosity while tapping his fingers once against the table. But none of them mattered. Not really. Because the man at the head of the table still had not looked away from me. Luca Moretti. I did not know his name yet, but I felt the weight of it before I ever heard it spoken. He sat perfectly still while the room revolved around him. No raised voice. No threats. Just complete control. She works for the hotel, someone finally said. We can handle this quietly. My stomach twisted hard. Quietly. The word landed wrong. I swallowed so fast it hurt. Please, I managed softly. I did not hear anything. I swear. The man near the window gave a humorless laugh. That is what they always say. I stepped backward instinctively until the closed door pressed cold against my spine. My pulse thundered inside my ears so loudly I barely heard Luca speak again. What is your name? His voice was calm enough to make me more nervous somehow. Evelyn. My mouth felt dry. Evelyn Carter. How old are you, Evelyn Carter? 25. He nodded once, thoughtful, like he was filing information away somewhere inside his head. Student. I blinked in surprise. What? You have textbooks sticking out of your bag. I looked down automatically. My worn canvas tote rested beside the fallen tray, the edge of my nursing pharmacology textbook visible beneath my sweater. Heat crawled into my cheeks. It suddenly felt humiliating. Standing there in cheap black heels while these people probably spent more on dinner than I made in a month. I am in nursing school, I admitted quietly. I work events on weekends. Luca leaned back slightly in his chair. His silver watch caught the warm light overhead. You should not have opened that door tonight. I know. But you did. I nodded once because lying suddenly felt impossible around him. Another silence stretched across the room. One of the older men adjusted his cufflinks impatiently. Luca, he said carefully. The Russians are already nervous. If word spreads about a witness, she is not a witness. Luca interrupted him without raising his voice. The older man frowned. Then what is she? Luca finally stood. My breath caught immediately. He was taller than I realized. Broad shoulders beneath the black suit jacket. Dark hair brushed neatly away from his forehead. Controlled movement. Controlled breathing. Controlled everything. He walked toward me slowly enough that I could hear my own heartbeat with every step. When he stopped in front of me, the scent of cedar and rain wrapped around the cold air between us. His gray eyes moved briefly across my frightened face before settling back onto mine completely. She is under my protection now. The room went silent again. Completely silent. Then Luca looked down at the broken glass near my feet and spoke the sentence that changed my life forever. And from this moment on, he said quietly, nobody touches what belongs to me. The words hit the room harder than the shattered glass had. Nobody argued with him. That scared me more than anything else. The older man across the table opened his mouth like he wanted to protest, then thought better of it after one look from Luca. The silence that followed felt sharp enough to cut skin. I stood frozen against the door while my heart pounded so violently I could feel it in my throat. Protected. Mine. The two words circled each other inside my head in a way that made no sense together. Men like Luca Moretti did not protect women like me. Men like him existed in newspapers and crime documentaries and whispered conversations people stopped having when strangers walked too close. Yet every person in that room had immediately accepted his decision without question. Luca glanced once toward the broken champagne flutes at my feet. You are bleeding. I looked down in confusion. A thin line of red trailed across my palm, where one of the crystal shards had sliced my skin without me noticing. It barely hurt. Adrenaline had swallowed everything else. It is fine, I said quickly. I should go back to work. A few of the men exchanged quiet looks like I had said something unintentionally funny. Luca did not smile. No, he said simply. You should not. The older man near the window exhaled heavily. Luca, this is becoming complicated. It already was complicated before she walked in. Luca reached for a folded document on the table and slid it closed without even looking at it. The meeting is over. The authority in his voice ended the conversation immediately. Chairs shifted softly against marble floors. Expensive watches flashed beneath warm light as the men gathered papers and black cases with practiced efficiency. Nobody rushed. Nobody looked nervous. But the tension in the room changed shape somehow. like a storm moving farther away without fully disappearing. I stayed exactly where I was while Luca walked toward the windows overlooking the rain-soaked city below. His reflection blurred against the glass beside the Manhattan skyline. For several seconds he said nothing at all. Then quietly, without turning around, he asked, "Do you live alone?" The question caught me off guard. "What? Your apartment. Do you live alone?" "Yes." I hesitated. "In Queens. How long have you worked here?" 8 months. He nodded faintly like he already knew the answer. That realization sent another wave of unease through me. My manager barely remembered my schedule half the time, but somehow this man knew details about my life after less than 5 minutes. One of the men by the door paused before leaving. Security downstairs already noticed the Russians exiting separately. They are suspicious. Luca finally turned back toward us. Calm gray eyes. Perfectly steady. Then give them another problem to focus on. The man nodded once and disappeared into the hallway. The room emptied quickly after that until only Luca and I remained standing beneath the golden light of the chandelier. Rain continued sliding down the windows behind him in silver streaks. Somewhere far below us, horns echoed faintly through Manhattan traffic. My breathing sounded embarrassingly loud in comparison. "You are scared," Luca said quietly. I almost laughed at how obvious that was. Should I not be? His expression shifted slightly. Not softer exactly, just less unreadable. Probably. Honesty should not have comforted me, but somehow it did. I pressed my injured palm carefully against my black skirt, trying not to shake. "If you are not going to hurt me," I said slowly, "then why am I still here?" Lucas studied me for a long moment before walking closer again. Not threatening, not rushed, controlled. Everything about him felt controlled. "Because," he said quietly, "the men in that room are not the most dangerous people you interrupted tonight." Cold spread slowly through my chest. "I do not understand." "You will." His phone buzzed once inside his jacket. He ignored it completely. "Right now," he continued, "someone downstairs is already trying to find out who you are." The blood drained from my face instantly. Luca noticed. Of course he noticed. He stepped closer until his voice dropped low enough that only I could hear it over the rain against the windows. "Which means if you leave this hotel alone tonight, Evelyn," he said carefully, "I cannot promise you will make it home." The floor beneath me suddenly felt unstable, like Manhattan itself had tilted sideways without warning. I stared at Luca while rain crawled down the windows behind him in endless silver lines, and for the first time that night, the fear became real enough to settle deep in my chest instead of just spinning inside my head. "You cannot promise I will make it home," I repeated softly. Saying the words out loud made them sound even worse. Luca held my gaze without blinking. No, the honesty in his answer terrified me more than any threat could have. Most dangerous men probably lied. They softened things. They pretended everything would be fine before pulling the ground out from under you. Luca did not seem interested in pretending. Somewhere outside the private room, distant ballroom music drifted faintly through the hallway walls. A piano, soft laughter, glasses clinking. Normal life continuing exactly the same while mine quietly collapsed in the span of 20 minutes. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the warmth of the room. I just opened the wrong door. My voice sounded smaller than I wanted it to. "I know. Then why would anyone care who I am?" Lucas slipped his phone from inside his jacket, glanced at the screen once, then set it face down on the table without answering immediately. The movement was calm, deliberate, like every second of silence belonged to him. Because people become nervous when strangers hear private conversations. I did not hear enough to understand anything. That does not matter. His gray eyes settled on me again. Fear makes intelligent men irrational. I looked away first. The pressure of his attention was almost impossible to hold for too long. My injured hand throbbed faintly now that the adrenaline was fading, and tiny pieces of broken crystal still sparkled near my shoes beneath the chandelier light. I suddenly wanted my tiny apartment in Queens more than I had ever wanted anything in my life. My ugly couch, my cheap coffee maker, the radiator that clanged all night every winter. Normal things. Safe things. My manager is probably looking for me. Luca walked toward the table and poured water into a clean crystal glass with steady hands. "Your manager already knows you left." I frowned immediately. "What?" He slid the glass toward me. "Sit down, Evelyn." How does my manager know I left? Luca waited until I finally crossed the room on unsteady legs before answering. Because someone informed him. A cold feeling crept slowly up my spine. You told him? One of my men did. You had absolutely no right to do that. The sharpness in my voice surprised both of us. For one brief second, silence filled the room again. I realized too late that I had just snapped at a man powerful enough to make entire rooms obey him without question. But Luca only watched me carefully. Not angry. Interested. You are upset, he observed calmly. Of course I am upset. I pushed the untouched glass of water away from me. I do not even know who you are. One corner of his mouth moved slightly. Not a smile exactly. More like acknowledgement. Luca Moretti. The name settled heavily into the room. Even I recognized it vaguely. Newspaper headlines. Financial rumors. Stories whispered between hospital staff during overnight shifts. Moretti Holdings. Real estate. Shipping. Security firms. Expensive charities with cameras always nearby. But beneath those polished headlines existed something darker everyone pretended not to see directly. My stomach tightened. You are Mafia. Luca leaned back in his chair slowly. That word means different things to different people. That is not a no. No, he agreed quietly. Thunder rolled somewhere beyond the skyscrapers outside, low and distant. I stared at him across the long table while my heartbeat climbed higher all over again. He did not look dangerous in the loud way movies always showed. No shouting, no threats, no obvious cruelty. Luca Moretti looked dangerous because he looked completely calm while discussing things that should have terrified any normal person. His phone buzzed again. This time he answered, yes. Silence while he listened. His expression did not change at first. Then very slightly, his eyes hardened. Which elevator? Another pause. Keep them downstairs. My pulse spiked instantly. Luca ended the call and stood in one smooth movement. What happened? I asked before I could stop myself. He buttoned his suit jacket slowly, gaze shifting toward the hallway door. The men looking for you, he said quietly. Just arrived in the lobby. My entire body went cold. For 1 second, I genuinely forgot how to breathe. The men looking for me were downstairs. In the same building. Probably asking questions about a waitress who had accidentally walked into the wrong room and seen something she never should have seen. Rain hammered harder against the windows now, rattling softly against the glass 40 stories above Manhattan, while thunder rolled somewhere beyond the skyline. Luca adjusted the cuff of his black suit with infuriating calm, like this was another normal inconvenience in an already busy evening. Meanwhile, my thoughts were spiraling so fast I could barely keep up with them. I need to leave, I whispered. Luca looked at me steadily. No. If they are looking for me here, then staying is dangerous. Leaving is worse. You do not know that. I do. His certainty hit harder than raised voices ever could. I stood quickly from the chair, my nerves stretched too tight to sit still another second. This is insane. I work double shifts to pay rent and survive nursing school. I am not part of whatever this is. I motioned helplessly toward the private room, the city, him. I cannot just disappear into some mafia nightmare because I opened the wrong door. Luca watched me pace once across the marble floor before speaking again. Do you trust your instincts, Evelyn? The question caught me off guard. What? Your instincts? The feeling that tells you when someone is dangerous. Obviously. Good. He stepped closer slowly. Then listened to them. I hated that my instincts were already screaming at me. Not just about the men downstairs. About him too. Everything around Luca Moretti felt dangerous in ways I could not fully explain yet. Not explosive danger. Controlled danger. Like standing near the edge of deep water at night and realizing too late you could disappear without making a sound. Another buzz came through his phone. This time he glanced at the screen and his jaw tightened almost invisibly. They bribed one of the hotel employees, he said quietly. They have your full name now. My stomach dropped so violently I grabbed the edge of the chair to steady myself. How? Your time card. I closed my eyes for one horrible second. Of course. The hotel system had all my information. Address. Emergency contacts. Schedule. Everything. Oh my God. Panic flooded my chest so fast it hurt. My apartment. Luca crossed the room immediately, voice calm and low. Your building already has security outside. I stared at him in disbelief. You sent people to my apartment? Yes. Without asking me. You were busy panicking. I opened my mouth to argue again, but the words died before they fully formed. Because beneath the fear and confusion, one terrifying realization kept growing louder inside my head. Luca Moretti had protected me faster than I had protected myself. The thought unsettled me more than anything else tonight. A sharp knock interrupted the silence. The private room door opened slightly before one of Luca's men stepped inside. Tall, dark suit, earpiece curled behind one ear. The Russians are demanding access to the floor. Luca's expression never changed. Denied. They are becoming aggressive with hotel security. Luca nodded once. Move Miss Carter through the west corridor. My pulse spiked instantly. Move me where? Neither man answered immediately. Luca picked up my torn canvas bag from beside the table and held it out toward me. Seeing my cheap nursing textbook against his expensive watch and tailored suit created such a ridiculous contrast that for one surreal second I almost laughed. Instead, I took the bag carefully, fingers brushing his for half a second too long. Warm skin, steady hands. Dangerous man. Listen carefully, Luca said quietly. From this point forward, you stay beside me at all times. Why? His gray eyes locked onto mine completely. Because every person in this city who wants information tonight will assume one thing. Fear curled tighter in my chest. What thing? Luca stepped closer until his voice dropped almost to a whisper beneath the sound of rain against the windows. That if I decided to keep you alive, he said softly, then you must be important to me. The west corridor behind the ballroom looked nothing like the glamorous hotel guests ever saw. The gold chandeliers disappeared, replaced by narrow service hallways lit with cold fluorescent lights that hummed softly overhead. My black heels clicked unevenly against the polished concrete floor, while Luca walked beside me with calm, measured steps that somehow made my panic feel even louder. Two men in dark suits moved ahead of us, without speaking. Another followed several feet behind. I kept tightening my grip around my canvas bag like it could somehow anchor me back to normal life. It did not work. Nothing about tonight felt normal anymore. This is insane, I whispered as we turned another corner near the freight elevators. You keep saying that. Luca did not even look at me. Because it is true. No, his gray eyes shifted toward me briefly. It is dangerous. There is a difference. I wanted to argue, but my heartbeat was still too fast, and my thoughts kept circling the same terrifying question over and over. Who exactly had I interrupted upstairs? Outside one of the service entrances, rain lashed against the alley behind the hotel hard enough to blur the city lights beyond the glass. Thunder rolled again somewhere above Manhattan, while one of Luca's men pressed a hand to his earpiece, listening carefully. South lobby compromised, he said quietly. Two unknown vehicles outside. My stomach twisted instantly. Luca barely reacted. Use the underground exit. Underground exit. Of course, a man like him had multiple escape routes through luxury hotels. The realization should not have surprised me anymore, but somehow it still did. We moved quickly through another hallway lined with stacked banquet chairs and rolling silver trays. The scent of rain and industrial cleaner mixed strangely in the cold air. Somewhere nearby, kitchen staff shouted over clattering dishes, completely unaware that my entire life had just changed floors above them. I almost envied them. Luca. His name felt strange in my mouth. Too personal for someone I had met less than an hour ago. He glanced toward me immediately anyway. What? What exactly did I walk into tonight? His jaw tightened slightly. Not enough for most people to notice. Enough for me to notice. A negotiation. That is not a real answer. It is the only one you are getting tonight. Frustration sparked briefly through my fear. You keep acting like you are protecting me, but you are also refusing to tell me anything. Luca stopped walking so suddenly I nearly ran into him. The men ahead paused instantly. Rain hammered against distant metal pipes somewhere in the underground levels of the hotel. He looked down at me with that same calm expression that somehow always felt heavier than anger. You think information would make this easier? At least I would understand what is happening. No, his voice stayed low. Controlled. You would understand how dangerous it actually is. Silence stretched between us. My pulse stumbled awkwardly against my ribs because he was standing too close again. Too close for my brain to function properly. The fluorescent lights overhead sharpened the angles of his face, turning his gray eyes almost silver in the cold underground corridor. Dangerous man. Beautiful man. The combination felt unfair somehow. I have clinical rotations at 7 tomorrow morning, I said quietly, mostly because I needed to remember who I was before tonight happened. I cannot disappear. Lucas studied me for one long second. You are still thinking about nursing school. Of course I am. Interesting. Why is that interesting? One corner of his mouth shifted faintly. Most people stop thinking clearly when they are afraid. Before I could answer, one of the guards near the freight elevator suddenly straightened. Movement outside. The atmosphere changed instantly. Not panic. Something sharper. Focused. Lucas stepped in front of me automatically, his body blocking part of the corridor without hesitation. The movement happened so naturally it almost felt instinctive. My breath caught. What is happening? I whispered. Nobody answered immediately. The elevator doors slid open with a soft metallic sound. Cold air drifted out from the underground garage beyond. Black SUVs waited near the loading area with engines already running. Rainwater reflected across the concrete floors in silver puddles beneath the fluorescent lights. One of Luca's men spoke quietly into his earpiece again before looking toward us. We need to move now. Luca kept his eyes fixed somewhere beyond the garage entrance while speaking directly to me. Stay beside me, Evelyn. Fear curled tighter inside my chest. And if I do not, for the first time all night, something dangerous flickered visibly across Luca's expression. Not anger. Something colder. Protective in a way that almost scared me more. Then I cannot guarantee, he said softly, that they will not take you before. We reached the car. The underground garage smelled like rain, gasoline, and cold concrete. Water dripped steadily from exposed pipes overhead, echoing through the massive space while black SUVs idled beneath flickering fluorescent lights. My pulse was beating so hard it almost drowned out the sound of the engines. Lucas stayed directly beside me as we crossed the garage floor, his attention constantly moving between the exits, the parked vehicles, and the shadows beyond the loading dock entrance. Every man around him moved with the same controlled alertness. No panic, no wasted motion. That frightened me more than chaos would have. These people were used to danger. Get in, one of the guards said, opening the rear door of the nearest SUV. I stopped moving. My brain finally caught up to the insanity of what was happening. If I got into that car, everything changed. It would become real in a way I could not take back. Luca noticed my hesitation instantly. Of course he did. Evelyn, I cannot do this. The words came out breathless. I do not even know where you are taking me. Rain lashed harder outside the garage entrance, wind carrying mist across the concrete floor near the loading dock. Somewhere in the distance, tires screeched briefly against wet pavement before disappearing into Manhattan traffic. Lucas stepped closer, lowering his voice enough that only I could hear him. You are not safe alone tonight. You keep saying that. Because it is true. I shook my head hard. No, this is crazy. Maybe those men downstairs were not even looking for me specifically. Luca's expression remained unreadable for half a second too long. That tiny pause told me everything. They were, I whispered. He did not deny it. Fear twisted deeper into my chest. I looked toward the garage exit instinctively, toward the storm outside and the city beyond it. Queens suddenly felt impossibly far away. My apartment. My textbooks spread across the kitchen table. My clinical scrubs hanging over the radiator because I forgot to fold laundry before work. Normal life already felt like something belonging to another person. I just wanted extra tips tonight, I said quietly, almost to myself. Luca's gaze softened so slightly, I almost imagined it. I know. Another guard pressed a hand to his earpiece sharply. Vehicle approaching. The atmosphere shifted immediately. Every man near us straightened at once. One moved closer to the garage entrance, while another subtly positioned himself beside me. My stomach dropped. Headlights appeared briefly through the rain outside before disappearing again behind concrete pillars. Luca did not waste another second. His hand closed gently around my wrist. Warm, firm, steady. Into the car, Evelyn. The contact sent a strange shock through me. Not fear exactly. Awareness. Dangerous awareness. Luca, now. Something in his voice erased hesitation completely. I climbed into the SUV before my courage could fail me again. The leather seats smelled expensive and unfamiliar, the interior glowing softly beneath dim overhead lights. Rain streaked across the tinted windows while the city blurred outside in silver and gold reflections. Luca slid in beside me 1 second later, just as the doors locked automatically with a heavy mechanical click. My heartbeat stumbled. Locked. The driver pulled away immediately, tires rolling smoothly across wet concrete as the convoy moved toward the garage exit. I watched Manhattan pass outside the rain-covered windows while panic curled tighter inside my ribs with every block we traveled farther from the hotel. Luca sat beside me in complete silence, one hand resting loosely against the dark leather seat between us. Calm, controlled, untouched by the storm surrounding him. I envied that calm more than I wanted to admit. Where are we going? I finally asked. Somewhere secure. That is not an answer. It is enough of one for tonight. Frustration burned briefly through my fear again. You cannot keep me prisoner because your business deal went wrong. Luca turned toward me slowly. Streetlights flashed silver across his face through the rain-soaked windows. Do you think I want this situation? I think you are used to controlling people. His jaw tightened faintly. Control keeps people alive. That sounds exactly like something a mafia boss would say. Silence filled the SUV for several seconds after that. Then unexpectedly, Luca looked out toward the storm-covered city and spoke so quietly I almost missed it. You still think this night is about me? I frowned immediately. What does that mean? His gray eyes shifted back toward mine. Colder now. More dangerous. It means, he said carefully, you still do not understand who was sitting at that table before you walked in. Rain blurred Manhattan into streaks of silver and amber outside the tinted SUV windows, while silence settled heavily between us. The city looked different sitting beside Luca Moretti. Darker somehow. Less like a place filled with ordinary people trying to survive, and more like a chessboard controlled by men I had never even known existed. I tightened my grip on my canvas bag until my fingers hurt. Then tell me, I said quietly, who was at that table? Luca watched the storm outside for several seconds before answering. Men who build power quietly. That sounds like something from a crime documentary. Most documentaries are simplified for people who want easy villains. I stared at him in disbelief. You cannot seriously expect me to stay calm after tonight. I do not expect calm. His voice stayed low and even. I expect survival instincts. The convoy turned sharply onto a quieter avenue lined with dark office towers and glowing penthouse windows high above the streets. Rainwater sprayed beneath the tires while headlights reflected across slick pavement like shattered gold. Somewhere nearby, a siren echoed faintly through the city. I suddenly realized how late it had become. My phone buzzed inside my bag for the first time in almost an hour. The sound made me jump. Luca noticed instantly. Of course he did. You should answer it, he said. I hesitated before pulling out my phone. 3 missed calls from my manager. 2 from my friend Rachel. 1 voicemail from my clinical supervisor reminding students about tomorrow morning's rotation schedule. The normality of it nearly made my chest ache. I answered Rachel's call first. Oh my God, she blurted immediately. Where are you? Your manager said you left with some VIP guest, and then stopped answering texts. I glanced toward Luca automatically. He sat perfectly calm beside me, one hand resting against the dark leather seat, while city lights flashed across his sharp profile. I am fine, I lied softly. Something happened at work. You sound weird. I am just tired. Rachel lowered her voice slightly. Evie, are you crying? I swallowed hard. I had not even realized tears were sitting in my eyes until that moment. No, another lie. Luca looked toward me briefly, then away again, giving me privacy without actually distancing himself. The gesture unsettled me in ways I could not explain. Listen, Rachel continued carefully. There are 2 men outside your apartment building. Every muscle in my body went rigid. Luca's eyes shifted toward me immediately. What? I whispered. They keep sitting in a black sedan across the street, Rachel said. I thought maybe they were cops or something, but now I am seriously getting nervous. Cold spread through my chest. Luca held out his hand silently. Who was that? Rachel asked instantly. Nobody. Another lie that sounded weaker this time. Luca waited patiently, hand still extended toward the phone. Calm. Controlled. Like he already knew I would eventually give it to him. I hated how right he probably was. Evie, Rachel said softly now. What is going on? I looked out the rain-streaked window because suddenly I could not bear looking directly at Luca anymore. I think, I whispered carefully, I made a really bad mistake tonight. Silence crackled softly through the phone. Do you need me to call someone? Before I could answer, The SUV suddenly slowed hard enough to throw me slightly forward. Tires hissed against wet pavement. Every guard vehicle around us shifted position instantly. Luca's expression changed immediately. Not panic. Focus. Sharp and immediate. What happened? I asked breathlessly. The driver's voice came low through the front seat. Traffic blockage ahead. Luca reached for the phone still in my hand, without taking his eyes off the street outside. This time I gave it to him automatically. He spoke calmly into it. Rachel. My friend went completely silent for a second. Who is this? Someone keeping Evelyn alive tonight. My pulse stumbled violently. Luca's gaze scanned the dark street outside while rain hammered harder against the SUV roof. Lock your apartment door, he continued evenly. Do not let anyone inside unless Evelyn calls you personally. Excuse me. Rachel sounded horrified now. Who are you people? Luca ended the call before answering. Luca, I whispered sharply. That was insane. He ignored me completely, eyes fixed ahead through the rain-covered windshield. The convoy had stopped entirely now. Black sedans blocked part of the intersection ahead beneath flickering streetlights. Men stood outside them in dark coats despite the storm. Waiting. The atmosphere inside the SUV shifted instantly colder. One of Luca's guards spoke quietly into his earpiece. They found us. Luca's jaw tightened almost invisibly. Then very calmly, without looking away from the blocked street ahead, he reached over and locked his hand firmly around mine. His hand was warm, steady, completely certain. Mine was trembling badly enough that he probably felt every pulse of panic racing through my fingers. Outside the SUV, rain poured across the blocked intersection in silver sheets beneath flickering streetlights. The men standing near the black sedans ahead looked almost unreal through the storm. Dark coats, motionless silhouettes. Waiting. My mouth went dry instantly. Luca, I whispered. Who are they? His thumb shifted once lightly against the back of my hand before he released me. The brief contact disappeared too quickly, leaving behind a strange, hollow feeling I did not understand. People who do not like losing leverage. Leverage. Luca leaned slightly forward toward the driver. Alternative route. Already blocked, the driver answered quietly. The atmosphere inside the SUV tightened immediately. One of the guards in the front passenger seat adjusted something beneath his jacket while speaking softly into his earpiece. Rain hammered harder against the roof overhead, surrounding us with constant noise that somehow made the silence inside the vehicle feel heavier. I looked back toward the intersection again. One of the men outside stepped forward slightly beneath the rain. Even through the tinted windows, I could feel the tension in the way Luca's entire security team reacted to that movement. Controlled. Alert. Ready. This cannot seriously be happening, I whispered to myself. Luca heard me anyway. It is happening. You keep saying things like that like I am supposed to just accept them. Acceptance is faster than denial. Frustration flashed hot through my fear. You sound like you rehearsed these answers in advance. Unexpectedly, something almost human flickered across his expression. Tired amusement, maybe. No, he said quietly. I just spend very little time lying to myself. Before I could respond, headlights suddenly appeared fast behind us in the rain-soaked street. Another black SUV. Then another. Luca's convoy tightened formation instantly around our vehicle, while voices crackled through hidden radios near the front seats. My heartbeat climbed even higher. What now? Luca glanced behind us once before answering. Now they decide whether tonight becomes expensive or personal. That sentence means absolutely nothing to me. Good. The man standing ahead, near the blocked intersection, finally moved closer through the rain. Even from inside the SUV, I could tell he carried himself differently than the others. Older maybe. Confident. His dark coat hung perfectly despite the storm, and when he stopped directly beneath a streetlight, Luca's entire posture shifted almost imperceptibly beside me. Not fear. Recognition. You know him, I realized softly. Luca stayed silent for 1 second too long. Luca. His jaw tightened faintly. His name is Victor Sokolov. Cold crawled slowly through my chest. The name sounded dangerous all by itself. And why does Victor Sokolov care about me? Luca finally looked directly at me again. Gray eyes. Sharp. Unreadable. Because he believes you overheard details connected to tonight's meeting. But I did not. Truth rarely matters during negotiations like these. Rainwater streamed down the SUV windows between us and the waiting men outside. I suddenly felt trapped in ways I could not explain properly. Not physically trapped. Something worse. Like invisible lines had closed around me. Without warning, the second I opened that hotel door. "I want to go home," I whispered. Luca's expression changed slightly again. Softer around the edges for barely half a second. "I know." The honesty in his voice hurt unexpectedly. Before either of us could say anything else, Viktor Sokolov slowly raised one gloved hand toward our SUV. One deliberate gesture. Nothing aggressive. Somehow it terrified me anyway. Luca watched the movement carefully before speaking to the driver. "Do not stop." The SUV engine growled louder beneath us. My pulse spiked instantly. "Wait, what are we doing?" Luca reached for my hand again automatically, just as the convoy surged forward through the rain-soaked intersection. Tires hissed sharply against wet pavement, while headlights flashed violently across the windows around us. My breath caught hard in my throat as the vehicles outside suddenly moved too fast. Too fast. "Luca." His fingers tightened around mine. Calm. Certain. Protective. "Look at me, Evelyn." I did automatically. Gray eyes locked onto mine while the storm and chaos outside blurred together beyond the rain-covered glass. "Whatever happens in the next 60 seconds, he said quietly, "you stay beside me." The next 60 seconds stretched longer than the rest of my life combined. Rain exploded across the windshield while the SUV accelerated hard through the blocked intersection, engines roaring around us beneath the storm. My shoulder slammed lightly against Luca's chest as the vehicle turned sharply onto another avenue, tires sliding briefly across wet pavement before correcting again. I grabbed the leather seat instinctively with one hand, while Luca kept the other firmly around mine. Steady, unshaken, like the chaos outside obeyed different rules for him. Headlights flashed violently through the tinted windows. Another black sedan appeared beside us for one terrifying second before falling back into the rain behind the convoy. Voices crackled rapidly through hidden radios near the front seats, too fast and low for me to fully understand. Every streetlight reflected silver across the wet roads, while Manhattan blurred past in streaks of gold and gray outside. My pulse hurt. Actually hurt. "Luca," I breathed. "Please tell me what is happening." He looked toward the side mirror briefly before answering. "Victor wants leverage." "You keep saying that word." "Because it matters." "How?" His jaw tightened faintly. "The meeting tonight was supposed to stay private. Then why would they risk all this attention over one waitress?" Luca finally looked directly at me again. Something colder had settled behind his eyes now. Sharper. "Because you are no longer just a waitress to them." Fear twisted through my stomach instantly. "What does that mean?" "It means," he said quietly, "they saw me choose you." The words landed harder than I expected. "Choose you." Before I could answer, the convoy suddenly slowed again near a red light reflecting across rain-soaked asphalt. The city around us had changed. Fewer skyscrapers. Quieter streets. Old brick buildings lined with dark windows and flickering neon signs blurred past outside. Somewhere nearby, elevated subway tracks rattled overhead through the storm. Brooklyn, maybe. I could not even tell anymore. Everything felt unreal. Luca released my hand slowly, only to reach into the inside pocket of his suit jacket and pull out a clean white handkerchief. "Your palm." I blinked in confusion. "What?" He nodded toward my injured hand. Blood from the small crystal cut earlier had dried faintly across my skin without me noticing. My breathing still felt too uneven to process simple things properly. Luca took my hand gently before I could protest. Warm fingers. Controlled movement. His attention lowered completely onto the cut while the storm continued raging outside the SUV windows. "It is nothing," I whispered. "Small injuries become larger ones when ignored." The sentence sounded like it meant more than the cut itself. He wrapped the cloth carefully around my palm with surprising precision. Not rushed. Not awkward. Like he was used to taking care of damage quietly. I stared at him while he tied the fabric securely around my hand. Dangerous man. Steady hands. The contrast unsettled me deeply. "You should not know how to do that," I said softly before thinking. Luca glanced up briefly. "Why?" "Because men like you are usually the reason people need bandages." Silence settled heavily between us after that. The driver looked straight ahead very carefully. Even the guards avoided reacting. I instantly regretted saying it. But Luca only leaned back against the leather seat again, eyes shifting toward the rain outside. You think you understand men like me already. Do I not? His expression became unreadable again. No. Thunder rolled somewhere above the city while the convoy crossed another intersection, glowing red beneath traffic lights, and rang. I looked down at the white cloth wrapped around my palm. Expensive fabric. Tiny black embroidered initials near the edge. Elam. My chest tightened unexpectedly. Why are you really protecting me? The question slipped out quietly. Lucas stayed silent for several seconds. Long enough that I thought he might ignore it entirely. Then finally, he answered without looking at me. Because you interrupted something tonight. I know that already. No, his voice lowered slightly. You interrupted a betrayal. Cold spread slowly through me again. Luca turned toward the dark city beyond the rain-streaked windows, expression hardening almost imperceptibly. And the only reason I am still alive to sit beside you right now, he said quietly, is because you walked into that room at the exact wrong moment. For a moment, I forgot about the storm outside the SUV. Forgot about Viktor Sokolov and the men searching for me across Manhattan. Forgot about the fact that I was sitting beside one of the most dangerous men I had ever met. I could only stare at Luca while his words settled heavily into the silence between us. You are alive because of me? I whispered. Luca's gray eyes remained fixed on the rain streaking across the windows. Partially. That is not a normal answer. Nothing about tonight is normal. The convoy turned beneath elevated train tracks rattling overhead while water sprayed across the dark streets around us. Neon signs reflected against wet pavement outside in broken streaks of red and blue. Brooklyn. Definitely Brooklyn now. I recognized some of the older buildings sliding past through the storm. Small. Diners. Closed laundromats. Corner stores glowing beneath fluorescent lights. Ordinary places existing beside an extraordinary nightmare. What betrayal? I asked quietly. Lucas stayed silent for several seconds. Long enough for me to think he would ignore the question again. Then finally he spoke. Someone at that table intended to hand over information that would destroy one of my shipping routes. Shipping routes? Yes. Illegal ones. His jaw tightened faintly. You ask direct questions. You give vague answers. One corner of his mouth moved slightly again. Not amusement exactly. Recognition maybe. Like he was slowly realizing I would not stop pushing simply because he was intimidating. The SUV slowed gradually near a tall building overlooking the East River. Modern glass. Private entrance. Security cameras mounted discreetly along the concrete walls outside. The gates opened before we even reached them. Lucas people again. Always prepared. Always watching. The realization made me uneasy in ways I could not explain properly. The convoy disappeared into another underground garage while rain thundered overhead against the concrete structure. I suddenly felt exhausted down to my bones. Not physically, emotionally. Like my brain had spent too many hours trying to survive information it was never designed to process. You should sleep when we get upstairs, Lucas said quietly beside me. I let out a soft laugh that sounded almost hysterical. You think I can sleep after tonight? Eventually your body will force you to. The SUV stopped smoothly beside a private elevator. Guards exited first, scanning the garage automatically before one opened my door. Cold air rushed inside immediately, carrying the scent of rain and concrete. I hesitated before stepping out. Luca noticed. You are safe here. That word does not mean much anymore. Something flickered briefly across his face at that. Regret maybe. Then it disappeared behind calm control again. We crossed the garage together in silence while the elevator doors opened ahead of us with a soft metallic sound. Inside, polished steel reflected distorted images of all of us beneath warm overhead lighting. I barely recognized myself anymore. Smudged makeup, hair falling loose from its pins, fear sitting openly in my eyes. Lucas stood beside me looking untouched by the chaos of the night. Perfect black suit, calm expression, dangerous composure. The elevator climbed quietly through the building while nobody spoke. My pulse finally started slowing for the first time in hours. Maybe because there were no more speeding cars or blocked intersections outside. Maybe because exhaustion was beginning to overpower fear. Or maybe because despite every warning screaming inside my head, part of me believed Luca would actually keep me alive. That realization unsettled me most of all. The elevator doors finally opened into a massive penthouse wrapped in floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river and the storm beyond it. Soft amber lighting reflected across dark hardwood floors. Expensive furniture. Silence. The city glowed outside like scattered gold beneath the rain clouds. I stopped just inside the doorway, overwhelmed instantly by how different this world felt from mine. Luca loosened the cuffs of his suit jacket slowly before looking toward one of his guards. Nobody enters this floor without my permission. Understood. The guard disappeared immediately. Then suddenly it was just the two of us standing inside the quiet penthouse, while rain streaked endlessly across the windows overlooking Manhattan. I hugged my canvas bag tightly against my chest again. What happens now? Luca looked at me for a long moment before answering. Now, he said quietly, you stop being hunted long enough for me to figure out who betrayed me tonight. Fear curled cold through my stomach again. And if you cannot figure it out? Luca stepped closer slowly. Calm gray eyes locked onto mine completely. Then eventually, he said softly, they will realize the easiest way to hurt me is through you. The easiest way to hurt me is through you. The sentence stayed trapped inside my chest long after Luca said it. Rain slid endlessly across the massive penthouse windows overlooking the East River, while Manhattan glowed in blurred gold beyond the storm. Somewhere below us, distant traffic hummed through the city like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. I could feel it. Luca loosened his tie slowly before setting his phone on the kitchen island. Even exhausted, he moved with the same controlled precision he had carried all night. Nothing rushed. Nothing careless. It made the silence inside the penthouse feel strangely intimate despite the fear still sitting heavily between us. You keep talking like I matter to these people, I said quietly. I do not. Luca looked toward me from across the room. Tonight you do. Only because you decided I mattered. His expression darkened almost imperceptibly. No, because someone at that table believed they could manipulate me. I frowned slightly. Through me? Yes. That does not even make sense. Luca walked toward the windows overlooking the river. Thunder rolled softly beyond the glass, while lightning flashed somewhere over Manhattan for half a second. The betrayal tonight was designed carefully, he said quietly. Information leaked. Timing arranged. Certain men invited intentionally. And me? His gray eyes shifted toward me again. You were never supposed to exist inside that equation. Cold crept slowly through my chest. So opening that door ruined someone's plan? Exactly. I tried to process that while exhaustion dragged heavily at my thoughts. Then why does Victor care so much? Luca rested one hand lightly against the back of a leather chair, gaze distant now. Because if the betrayal failed, then everyone involved becomes vulnerable. You talk about this like corporations fighting over contracts. Power usually looks cleaner from the outside. Silence settled again. I stood awkwardly near the entrance of the penthouse, still clutching my canvas bag against my chest like armor. My feet hurt. My head hurt. My entire life felt like it had cracked open somewhere around the moment those champagne glasses shattered on the marble floor upstairs. Luca noticed me swaying slightly before I even realized it myself. You need food. I need my apartment. That is not possible tonight. Frustration flashed through me again. You keep deciding things for me. Because hesitation gets people hurt. You do not know me well enough to control my life. Luca studied me quietly for a long moment. No, he agreed softly. But I know enough. The honesty in his voice unsettled me again. He crossed toward the kitchen area, while I finally set my bag down carefully beside the couch. The penthouse looked nothing like the tiny apartments I had spent my entire adult life struggling to afford. Everything here felt deliberate. Dark marble counters. Soft amber lighting. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined with books instead of decorations. No clutter. No warmth either. Beautiful and cold at the same time. Like him. Luca opened the refrigerator and pulled out bottled water before setting it in front of me, beside a small plate of fruit from somewhere inside the kitchen. The gesture was so unexpectedly normal that it almost broke something inside my chest. Dangerous men were not supposed to quietly hand you strawberries at 2 in the morning. You are staring, he said calmly. I looked away immediately. I am trying to understand you. That is a mistake. Why? Luca leaned lightly against the marble counter across from me. Because people who think they understand me usually become overconfident. And what happens to overconfident people? Lightning flashed again outside the windows, illuminating his face for one brief second. Sharp jawline. Gray eyes. Exhaustion hidden carefully beneath control. They stopped noticing danger. The answer sent another chill through me. I picked up the water bottle mostly to give my shaking hands something else to do. You still have not told me what happens tomorrow. Tomorrow depends on who betrayed me. And if you find them? Luca's expression hardened slightly. Then this ends. Hope flickered painfully through me. I can go home. His silence lasted too long. My stomach tightened instantly. Luca. He finally stepped closer again, lowering his voice until it rapped quietly through the room beneath the sound of rain against the windows. That depends on whether Victor believes you are still useful. Fear crawled cold through me again. And if he does? Luca looked directly into my eyes. Calm. Certain. Dangerous. Then eventually, he said softly, someone will try to take you from this penthouse. Sleep never came. The penthouse stayed wrapped in soft amber light, while rain battered the windows overlooking the East River until nearly dawn. I sat curled at one end of Luca's massive couch wearing one of his gray sweaters because my uniform had dried stiff and cold after the storm. The sleeves swallowed my hands completely. Nothing about that should have felt intimate. Somehow it did anyway. Luca stood near the windows most of the night, speaking quietly into his phone, while Manhattan slowly faded from black into dark blue beyond the glass. Every conversation sounded controlled, short, dangerous in the calm way only powerful men could manage. I learned quickly that nobody argued with Luca Moretti for long. Around 4 in the morning, silence finally settled over the penthouse again. The city outside looked exhausted beneath the rain clouds. So did he. Luca loosened the top button of his shirt and rested one hand against the kitchen counter for a brief second, like the weight of the night had finally reached him too. It was the first truly human thing I had seen from him since this nightmare started. You should rest, I said quietly before thinking. His gray eyes lifted toward me immediately. You are worried about me? You have been awake as long as I have. One corner of his mouth shifted faintly. That is not an answer. I looked down at the sleeves covering my hands. You have been protecting me all night. The silence after that felt different somehow, softer around the edges. Luca crossed the penthouse slowly until he stopped near the couch. Up close, exhaustion finally showed beneath his calm expression. Faint shadows beneath his eyes. Tension hidden carefully in his shoulders. Beautiful and dangerous and far too real suddenly. Evelyn, he said quietly, you still do not understand something. What? His gaze held mine steadily. Protection always has a price. Fear tightened softly through my chest again. And what is yours? Luca looked at me for one long second before answering. Loyalty. The words settled heavily between us. I swallowed carefully. You barely know me. I know enough. That is becoming your favorite sentence. This time the corner of his mouth actually lifted slightly. Small. Brief. Gone almost immediately. But I saw it. Somehow that tiny, almost smile affected me more than all the danger surrounding him. My pulse betrayed me instantly. Luca noticed. Of course he noticed. The silence stretched again while rain whispered softly against the windows behind him. Then suddenly his phone buzzed sharply against the marble counter. The atmosphere changed immediately. Calm disappeared from his face so fast it made my stomach drop. He answered instantly. Speak. Silence while he listened. Every muscle in my body tightened watching his expression harden. When? Another pause. How many? Fear crawled slowly up my spine. Luca turned toward the windows overlooking the river while the city brightened faintly beneath the storm clouds outside. Double security on this floor, he said coldly into the phone. Nobody enters without visual confirmation from me personally. My heartbeat accelerated again. Luca ended the call slowly before turning back toward me. The silence that followed felt sharp enough to cut. What happened? I whispered. He did not answer immediately, which terrified me more than bad news would have. Luca. His gray eyes locked onto mine completely. Someone entered your apartment building 20 minutes ago. Cold rushed through me, so violently, I nearly stood up too fast from the couch. Rachel. She is alive. Relief hit so hard my knees almost gave out beneath me. Luca stepped closer immediately, steadying me gently by my arm before I could lose balance completely. Warm hand. Strong grip. Controlled strength. She is safe, he repeated quietly. My people got her out. I stared at him in disbelief. You moved my friend? I moved a potential target. This is insane. My voice cracked slightly now from exhaustion and fear. Do you hear yourself? Luca's expression remained calm, but colder now. Sharper. They searched your apartment for you, Evelyn. My blood ran cold. Victor. No, the answer came instantly. Someone else. The room suddenly felt too small despite the massive penthouse surrounding us. Rain continued sliding endlessly down the windows while Manhattan slowly woke beneath the storm outside. I wrapped my arms around myself again, breathing unevenly now. How many people are involved in this? Luca looked toward the city for one long second before answering quietly. More than there should be. Fear settled deeper into my chest. What happens if they find me here? Luca's gaze shifted back toward mine. Calm. Certain. Possessive in a way that made my pulse stumble again despite everything. They will not. You cannot promise that. Luca stepped closer until his voice lowered almost to a whisper between us. No, he said softly. But I can promise something else. What? His hand tightened slightly against my arm, while thunder rolled low across Manhattan beyond the glass. Anyone who tries taking you from me, he said quietly, will learn exactly why people fear my